Today we will see about the physiology of muscle, that is chapter 3. So this is the lecture outline and this is objectives. Muscles. Muscles, as you know, muscle is one of the 4 types of tissues. We have 4 types of tissue. The first one is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue, and muscle tissue. So muscle is one of the 4 types of tissues that is generate force and movementous. The ability of muscle to use chemical energy to produce force and movement is limited to extent in most cells, but in muscle cells it has become dominant. So muscle generate force and movement is used in regulation of most of the internal environment, and they also produce movement in external environment. So muscles are important for also for communications, like in humans the ability to communicate whether by speech, writing, or expression, artistic expression, also depends on muscle contractions. Contractions. So indeed it's only by controlling the activity of muscles that human mind ultimately expresses itself. So muscles, like neurons, excited chemically, electrically, and mechanically to produce action potential that is transmitted along their cell membranes. So cell membranes. So in unlike neurons, they respond to stimuli by activating contractile mechanism. The contractile protein, myosin, and actin, they are abundant in muscle, so they are primary structural components that bring about contraction. They are important for contractions. Respond to stimuli by activating contractile mechanism. So myosin and actin myosin is a part of thick filament, and actin thick filament. Actin is for thin filament. So actin and thin filament are the part of myofibrils, or the part of sarcomeres, which is the functional and structural unit of the muscle. So muscle converts potential energy of food into mechanical energy. About 40% of the body weight in men and 32% in women is skeletal muscle, and perhaps another 10% is smooth and cardiac muscle. So this is body weight. Function of muscular system. As you know, the first function of muscular system is maintenance of posture. So posture, muscle contractions is constantly allowing us to remain upright. So muscle contractions are allow us to stand erect, and also for good positions and structure, and to maintain balance between left and right muscles. So this is our left and right sides of our body. So it's important for maintenance of posture. The other is production of body heat, or heat production. This heat production occurs via shivering, so an involuntary contraction of skeletal muscle. So shivering will produce body heat, and also exercise or movement of muscles will produce body heat. So the other is movement of body parts. So blood through body, food through GIT. So this is an important part of muscle, that is movement of body parts, movement of some structures like blood and food. So this is motion. The other is respiration. Respiration is important for inhaling and exhaling oxygen and carbon dioxide, and also for exchange of blood gases or air gases. So this is for instance there are muscles which is important for respiration, like diaphragm, and abdominal muscles, that is flat muscles, and also thoracic muscles are important for respiration. The other is communication. So some muscles are important for also communication, like tongue muscles, and others are important for communication, to communicate one person to the other. The other is body movement, to move from one place to the other place, or to get one material, or to withdraw another material, like this. The other is heartbeat. So heartbeat is a function of cardiac muscle, whereas motion, like movement of blood, movement of food in the GITR, it's a function of smooth muscle, whereas others are function of skeletal muscle. Having this concept, the other is muscle classification. We do have 3 types of dominant muscle types, or we do have 3 types of muscles. The one is skeletal muscle, the other is cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. So after observing the physiology of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle, this chapter will end up by these 3 main categories. So this is very important parts. So we will see. So this one is cardiac muscles found in the wall of myocardium, in the wall of heart or myocardium, is considered cardiac muscle, and this is skeletal muscle here, and also the GIT, all hollow organs and tubes are smooth muscle, and also all over muscles which attach bone to bone, except some facial muscles which attach superficially. They are all attached to bone to bone. This is skeletal muscle. And the heart, we can say cardiac muscle. So this is the same thing. So skeletal muscle, now we are starting skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are located attached to bones and move skeleton. So they are elongated, cylindrical, and multinucleated cells. So skeletal muscles are multinucleated cells, whereas smooth muscles are uninucleated, and cardiac is binucleated. So uninucleated cardiac is binucleated. So they are skeletal muscle are striated muscle. So striated muscle, it has light and dark bands which makes it straight, and they are voluntary muscles. So they are controlled by somatic nervous system. Since they are supplied by somatic nervous system, they are voluntary muscles. So they are used voluntarily. So this is skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscles have a response for muscle work activity or muscle load. So if you increase your exercise or muscle load, it will atrophy, it will hypertrophy. So that this is the function. So we do have properties of muscle. The first property is contractility. So the ability of muscle to shorten with force is contractility. The other is excitability or irritability. Irritability or excitability is the ability or the capacity of muscle to respond to one stimulus. And another is extensibility. Muscles can be stretched to its normal resting length beyond limited degree. So extensibility means ability of stretched to its normal resting length and beyond to limited degree. So this is extensibility. The other is elasticity. Elasticity is the ability of muscle to recoil to original resting length after stretch. So whether that material after stretching, whether it is back or regain its original resting length or not, is depend on elasticity. So elasticity is very important for recoiling. So some proteins will give us elasticity like titin. So titin muscle is important for muscle elasticity. So the other is also conductivity. Conductivity is the ability to propagate electrical signals over membrane, is called conductivity. So there are structural organisms of skeletal muscles. So muscle is an organ, so there is muscle. So muscle will divide into fascicle. Fascicle will give us fiber. Fiber means cell. So muscle fiber will give us myofibril. Myofibril will divide into the thick filament and thin filament. So thick filament is myosin, thin filament is actin, troponin, tropomyosin, and and titin. So when we come to this is muscle, the whole muscle. So having 3 layers, epimysium is the outer layer, then endomysium is this one, and also endomysium is this one, and so perimysium is this one. So from outer to inner, epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. They are connective tissue, which important. They are important for to separate one muscle to the other. So this is muscle, so with fascia. So the other is this is a fascicle. One band of these muscle groups are, this is fascicle, the whole is fascicle. So fascicle is with neuron, axon of motor neuron, blood vessel, and also these groups. So from the fascicle, this group, from one group, this group is considered as muscle fiber. So muscle fiber also gives us myofibrils. So this is a muscle fiber. This is the outer layer is sarcoloma. The sarcoloma means it's a membrane for the muscle. And also this is myofibrils, and myofibril contains thick filament and thin filament. So this is thick filament, and this is light one is thin filament. So this thick and thin filament will give us sarcomeres. That is sarcomers will give us sarcomers. So this is single thing is myofibril. So this is an organ, muscle, the whole muscle, then muscle fiber, then myofibril. Specialized intracellular structure is myofibril. It is intracellular structure, and then thick and thin filaments, they are cytoskeleton elements, and myosin and actin, they are protein molecules. So structure of skeletal muscle fiber, this is sarcoloma. Sarcoloma is a name given for muscle, which represents cell membrane. And the other is sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasm is they are similar in terms with cytoplasm in the other in the general cells. So sarcoplasm is a fluid compartment that is between myofibril sarcoplasm. So sarcoplasm contains lots of mitochondria, lots of glycogen granules, and sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is similar with endoplasmic reticulum, especially smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So as we have mentioned, so the space between myofibrils, are filled with intracellular fluid. So this space is known as sarcoplasm. This sarcoplasm containing potassium, magnesium, phosphate, and mitochondria. So sarcoplasmic reticulum, that is similar with endoplasmic reticulum. So sarcoplasmic reticulum is a tubular sac similar to smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and sarcoplasmic reticulum is a site for calcium storage, and action potential releases calcium from vesicles. So release of calcium triggers muscle contraction. So calcium is very important for muscle contraction. So this is sarcoloma or cell membrane, this is nucleus, and this is myofibril, and this is mitochondria, and this is space between the myofibril. This one myofibril, this one is myofibril. Between two myofibril is known as sarcoplasm or cytoplasm. So this is myofibrils. Myofibril. So another structure is here. So myofibril. So myofibril is each muscle fiber contains rod-like structures. These structures are called myofibrils. This is muscle fiber. So this is one is myofibril. So they are basically long bundles of protein structures called myofilaments. Their actions give muscle the ability to contract. So myofilaments are classified into thick filament and thin filament. Thick filament and thin filament. So having this concept, let us see. This is a muscle fiber. This is a myofibril. So this is the nucleus of the muscle. This is T-tubules. T-tubules is a continuation of this is sarcoloma. So this is T-tubules or transverse tubules. This one, the yellow one, and this one is Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, and this covering is sarcoloma, and this one is mitochondria. So this one fiber, so this is a thin filament, this is a red line, this is a thin filament, this is a Z disc that is connects thin filaments, and this is a thick filament. Thick filament contains this dark line, dark or black lines. So this is the only thick filament, so thick filament, so this is overlap between thick and thin filament. So this is in general myofibril. So having this concept, so fine structure of skeletal muscle. A muscle cell has two tubular structures. The one is transverse tubule or T-tubule. It is invagination of sarcoloma. It's a continuation of sarcoloma. So carry muscle action potential down into deepest region of the muscle to signal a release of calcium from terminal cisternae. So the other is the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum. So let us see this one. This is T-tubule or transverse tubule. It is continuation from sarcoloma. And this red line is known as thin filament, whereas this part is known as thick filament. This thick filament having heads, so this is known as myosin head or myosin. The other is, this is Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, and this is terminal cisternae, and this is terminal cisternae. Two terminal cisternae and one T-tubule is considered a triad. There are three, so we can say triad. This is also triad. So each T-tubule will be flanked by terminal cisternae, this one, and this forms so-called triad consisting of two terminal cisternae and one T-tubule. The other is myofilament. Myofilament will divide into two. The one is thick filament, the other is thin filament. So thick filament is made up of protein myosin. It is a motor protein, whereas thin filament consists of three proteins: actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. Actin is the primary structural protein of thin filament, and we will see these three things later. So having this concept, for instance, myofilament, a single myosin protein resembles two golf clubs whose shafts have been twisted about one another. This is shaft twisted one another. This is tail, and this is head. So this is heads. About 300 of this myosin molecule are joined together form single thick filament. So this is thick filament. So this is single myosin. So this is heads of about 300 myosin molecules. So this heads. So this is thick filament, and this is myosin protein. So this is myosin, and this is head, and head having two sites. One is actin binding site, the other is myosin ATP site. So myosin is having ATP site, and also actin having binding site. So this is two sites. And in general, this is myosin molecules, and this is heads, and this one is bridge. They are cross bridges. And three different types of thin filaments. Actin is a primary structural protein. It is a globular protein. So the other is tropomyosin. Tropomyosin is loosely wrapped around actin and covering myosin binding site. So the other is troponin. So we will see troponin. So let us first take this picture. This is thin filament. This is thin filament. So in thin filament, here is tropomyosin, which covering the myosin binding site, and this is tropomyosin, and this is globular protein. G actin is a globular actin. So this is all these circles are actin, and also this is troponin. This is troponin. So this is in general thin filaments. So when you see troponin is a triad of protein complex. Troponin is a regulatory protein bound to both actin and tropomyosin. So there is three polypeptide complex. One is okay, I will express in this picture. So first, the troponin is made up of 3 polypeptide units, and the first one is troponin C. C means stand for calcium. So troponin C is can bind with calcium. Troponin T is tropomyosin, so binds to tropomyosin. So tropomyosin I means stands for inhibitory. So troponin I means binds to actin. So this is the troponin, this is tropomyosin, this is actin. So in this area there are 3 polypeptide complexes. So this is 10I, or this is inhibitor, troponin inhibitor. So this is inhibitory subunit, whereas this is 10C, troponin C, that is binds to calcium, whereas this is 10T, that is helps position tropomyosin on actin. So this is inhibitor, troponin inhibitor. This is troponin C. This is tropomyosin. So this is actin, head to tail overlap, tropomyosin. So this is actin molecules. So this is actin molecules. This is a binding site for attachment with myosin cross bridge. By the way, this is actin, this is tropomyosin, and also this is troponin. So in general, this is all. This is tropomyosin, this is actin. This is troponin, this is tropomyosin. So in general, this is known as thin filament. So as we mentioned, this is all our thick filaments. So this is myosin 8, and this is area is ATP binding site. So this is thin filament, this is thick filament. Myofibril, each myofibril is made up of thousands repeating individual unit. This is known as individual unit. This is known as sarcomere. As you know, sarcomere is a functional and structural unit of the muscle. So sarcomere is repeated and give myofibril. So myofibril is made up of thousands repeating individual unit, or called sarcomere. So each sarcomere is ordered arrangement of thick and thin filaments. It is ordered arrangement thick and thin filaments. So thin filament means pinkish color. So this is thin filament. So thick filament is purple. So this is thick filament, and there are thick filament, thin filament overlapping. So this is area of overlap. So this is thin filament, this is area of overlap between thin and thick filament. This is thick filament. So by the way, from this one up to this one is known as sarcomere. So sarcomere gives one is this area known as A band. So A band contains only thin filament. So this is area of overlap. So from this one up to this one is known as A band. So A band contains only thick filament, and also area of overlap between thick and thin filament. So this one is also thin filament. So I band and A band, and also this myofibril. This is A band, so A band is divided. So A band is from this one up to this one is H band. So the center of H band is known as M line. M line divided into half, H zone, and also M line divided into A band in middle halfway. So this is very important. So by the way, and also M line is connects many thick filaments, and also similarly Z disc connects many thin filaments. So sarcomere is a portion of myofibril that lies between two successive Z discs. So sarcomere is a functional and structural unit, and sarcomere is flanked by two protein structures known as Z disc. Let me show you. This line is known as Z disc. This line is Z disc. So this between this area is known as sarcomere, that is found between two Z discs. Z disc also attaches one thin filament to the other thin filament. Then a portion of sarcomere which contains thick filament is known as A band. Yes. So from this one up to this one is known as A band, because it contains the whole length of thick filament. So this is known as A band. So A stands for anisotropic. A means anisotropic. Anisotropic means it appears dark under microscope. So it is dark under microscope. So A band contains zone of overlap. So this is zone of overlap. This is side and this side. Sides are made up of zone of overlap. Overlap means between this red thin filament and this is blue. I mean maybe black or like this color. So this color and this is area of overlap between actin and myosin. So and also contains H zone which contain only thick filament. So this middle from between this one and this one is known as H zone. So it's known as thick filament. It's only thick filament. So the center of this thick filament is known as the center of this H zone is known as this M line. This one is M line. This M line divides H zone into two, and also divides A band into two. So A band is contains two parts. The one is thin and thick filament overlap. The other is only thick filament, which is known as H zone. And also this center line is known as M line. M line contains one thick filament to the other thick filament. The other thin filament. So the other between this one and this one is known as thin filament. So this is known as I band. This is known as I band. So this I band is light band. It is known as isotropic. Isotropic means it appears light under microscope. So this light area. So these thin filaments are connected by Z disc. That's similar with M line for A band. Having this concept, this as I told you. So now this is up to this one is A band or thick filament. This is up to this one is thin filament. So between this one and this one is sarcomere. So now we have seen M line, I band, A band, H zone, and Z disc or Z line. What is thin filament, thick filament? So all we have seen. So the portion of sarcomere which does not contain any thick filament is known as I band. Yeah, it is. If it is thin filament, it is known as I band. So only thin filament is I band. So it's known as isotropic. That means it is light. So one I band is actually the part of two sarcomere at once. Yeah, because this is thin filament. So this is another sarcomere. This one is another sarcomere. So this one I band is the part of the sarcomere at once. In the middle of H zone there is M line. So M line functions to hold the thick filaments one another. So this is M line. So connects one thick filament to the other thick filament. So titin is another protein or thin filament. So this is titin. Very important protein. One is for stability, the other is for elasticity. elasticity, so we will see later. So all these lines are thick filament, whereas this green is thin filament, whereas this red is thick filament, whereas this one is thin. So the structure of myofibril: A band. So A band is darkest because it is anisotropic, so encompass the entire length of thick filament. We have seen as the outer edges of A band, the thick filament thin filaments overlap. Between two sides there is overlap between thick and thin filaments. The center of A band is occupied by thick filaments only, that is known as H zone. So the other type of band is I band. I band is lightest band of sarcomere. It is known as isotropic. Region occupied only by thin filament. Really, only I band is only contain thin filaments. So the center of I band is there is Z line or disc, Z disc. So where actin is attached, that means one actin or one thin filament attached to the other thin filament is Z line. So if you say Z line for I band, M line for A band. So H zone is the light area as the center of A band. That means which contains only H band is only contains thick filaments. So area where actin and myosin don't overlap. So H band contains only myosin tails, no myosin heads or cross bridges. So the other is M line. M line means attachment site for thick filament. That is equivalent to Z disc. Each M line divides A band in half, or H zone in half. Note light bands contain only actin filaments and are called I bands, and dark bands contain mainly myosin filaments is called A bands. So titin is another protein. It's the largest protein in the body, being made up of nearly 3000 amino acids. And titin serves to stabilize the position of thick filaments in relation to thin filaments along with M line proteins, whereas titin serves for muscle elasticity. And it is a very important part. And the other is this is a skeletal muscle organization. So this is a skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is composed of connective tissue, muscle fascicles, and blood vessels and nerves. So muscle fascicles is composed of individual muscle fiber. So muscle fiber contains sarcolemma, T-tubule. Sarcolemma is covering T-tubule, transverse tubule. Sarcoplasm is fluid compartment and multiple nuclei. And T-tubules are continuation of sarcolemma, and T-tubules are functionally linked to Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, and Sarcoplasm is an area which contains Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, Myofibril, mitochondria, and glycogen granules. And also Myofibril is composed of troponin, actin, Tropomyosin, titin, nubilin, and myosin. So myosin is thick filament, and troponin, actin, Tropomyosin, and titin is thin filament. So actin is primary thin filament, and myosin is primary thick filament. So all this thick and thin filament is organized into sarcomere. So this is muscle and skeletal muscle, and this is muscle fiber, and there are connective tissues. Finally it is muscle fiber. So this is an organization. This is an important section. So muscle contraction, sliding filament hypothesis. So this how muscle will contract. By the mechanism of muscle contraction is known as sliding filament hypothesis. So this section is will be covered in the part 2 of our video. So don't forget to subscribe this channel, and you will get the next videos. So have a nice time. Bye bye.